So I'm in the berry patch in my Melbourne garden and I'm just picking off the last of the berries. It's been a very, very fruitful spring due to all the rain, and now it's time to look at how to untangle these and prune them going forward. You might look at these and think, oh my goodness, where do I start? So let's just start bit by bit, section by section, and I'll show you how to figure it out. First of all, have a look for any dead sections. So these are bits that possibly should have been pruned off last year, but it doesn't matter. When you find them, you take them out. So they're all twined into the fence, so you just have to get it done bit by bit by bit. So that's your first thing to work through. But you don't have to work through things in order. The next thing that's important to take out is everything that's already fruited. Now, sometimes you'll find some slightly withered fruits that didn't quite do well because it might have been a hot day, or you'll find where there's the ends of berries where they've been plucked off. So any of the wood that's attached to them, you can cut those off because berries only fruit one season. Well, besides some thornless blackberries. But these particular cane berries, which are youngberries, thornless youngberries, once they've fruited, and that's the same with thornless blackberries, thornless loganberries, you need to take out any of the wood that's fruited. Now, of course, you can do this in winter, but my problem is in this suburban or urban garden is that it's so overgrown, there's nowhere to tie in the new wood. And the new wood, let's try and find some, this lovely new growth here, really vigorous and beautiful and fresh and green, compared to the old growth that's getting a bit insect eaten and a bit diseased, a few fungal diseases and things. This is what we need to tie in now. Now, if I don't clear out some of this other old wood, I've got nowhere left to tie the new wood in. Here's one other thing to look out for. Although these youngberries are labelled thornless, every now and then they, when they touch the ground, I think it seems to be, or otherwise it's also, they sometimes send up a thorny shoot. And so I have to be really careful to keep these under control. So I just thought I'd show you that as an awareness thing. I don't find this with my thornless blackberries, and I don't find it with the thornless loganberries. So yeah, keep those out so that they don't become dominant. So just cut them off at ground level. Another thing to take out is very thin, weedy canes like this. So any of this sort of growth, that just gets taken off at ground level because it's really not going to perform any useful function. It's too weak. So you want the vigorous canes to be kept. And get rid of all those. Here's some old fruiting wood. We've got clearly older or slightly more diseased foliage, and also browner wood with little marks on it that come from age or a slight bit of fungal disease, who knows, but just looking older. And here you've got brand new fresh growth, very vigorous new young shoots, different colour wood. It's hard to see in this dapple light, but really green and lush, and big long pieces. So this is the sort of wood we leave. So the reason we leave the new wood and take out the old growth is that all these cane berries have a 2-year cycle, or many of them have a 2-year cycle. So the first year they grow and produce fruit, and the second year they die off and new shoots come out at the same time. And it can be quite confusing as a new berry grower when you see new vigorous growth coming at the same time as fruiting. And your thought is, well, why do I need all this extra growth for? Because I've got all these berries abundantly. So the tricky thing is to tie in the new shoots at the time that you're getting the fruiting. And so that's why I'm deciding to take out the old growth in summer, which will have the effect too of diminishing the vigour of my berry plants. And as they're really well established, this is something that I don't mind doing. And it's a bit like summer pruning of fruit trees. So it's not necessarily a normal thing, but it's a tactic to control my berries in my back garden. Here's the original berry plant, and then you'll see that there's little shoots coming up around the place. We also want to dig those out, because if you have a really big garden, you could just let them go wild and maybe mow them, but in a smaller space where I'm wanting to keep them contained to this fence line for ease of tying up and being able to harvest them and look after them and manage them and net them when necessary, I need to keep them in a more controlled area. So be on the lookout for those little shoots everywhere and get those out too. Thought I'd show you these other thornless berries that I grow in my garden. These are thornless Loganberries, and you can see the various stages of ripeness there. So the really black ones, or the dark purple, when they're quite ripe and really good to eat. Again, you can eat them partially ripe to avoid the birds or to beat the birds, but they're better when they're fully dark and fall off really easily. They're not thought of as being the most productive berries, and they really are not super productive plants, although they're very lush looking with lovely lush leaves. Let's take a look at them. So here's the leaves of them. They're really large and soft, a bit like the berries, large and soft, and a bit duller, as you can see, much duller than the thornless youngberries. So this only takes up maybe 3 linear meters, so it's about half as vigorous as the thornless youngberry in my garden. But I really like the flavour of these, so I still think it's worth keeping them. Really, really tasty. To me, they're like a raspberry, very similar to a raspberry in their flavour. It's just another nice thing to have in the garden. Oops. So I'm deep in the garden here, and I just found something very exciting. Some beautiful, one maybe slightly overripe, whoops, 2 overripe, beautiful thornless Loganberries. This is the thornless Loganberry, and you can see that the young berries are just a bit shinier. It looks shiny in the picture, but this is actually, the Loganberry is actually quite a lot duller than the young berries. Very tasty when they're this ripe. Divine. Really good. So in summary, this is what we've been doing. We've been taking the big jumbled mess of berries, and this is only late December, very, very late December, and we're trying a slightly different method, which is summer pruning of spring to summer fruiting berries, cane berries. So you can see that I have reduced the tangled mess to principal areas of growth. I did actually start off with this plant just here, however it has sprouted here and right over here, and I'm quite comfortable with that level of growth, and then they're all tied along this fence. I have removed all the growth that had been fruiting, which, as I showed you before, had damaged leaves, very brown wood from, I didn't mention, probably also sun damage too. And it's really clear that this new growth is all what is going to constitute next year's fruiting. So as mentioned before, when you've got your plant fruiting, you leave this new growth that comes at the same time. Very confusing, but essential that you leave it, otherwise you won't get fruit next year. Now we're going to start to tie it all in and tip back the ends, and this is the structure that's going to make the vegetable garden have a lot more light, or this area have a lot more light, and also a lot less disease and pests because of the build-up of everything with the thickness of the growth. And you'll see that there's quite a lot of leaf hoppers here. There they go, flying around the place. A real pain in the backside. So opening things up will allow birds to get in and clear some of these things up, and also we can go around and, as my good friend Anne was suggesting to me, a bowl of soapy water and try and knock these into it. These may need a spray of soapy water because they're really difficult. You can give them a bit of a whack if you're not feeling Buddhist. But yeah, it's really important to kind of try and clean this up a little bit. So we'll start tying this in now. We're using a nice soft fabric tie, and these come in quite big rolls. This is just the end of a big roll, and this is very good for tying the branches on, as you'll see in a minute. And you can often untie them carefully and put them through the washing machine, and they go around a second year, so they'll last about 2 years. Now we've got all the canes tied up really nicely, we're going to perform another task that would normally be done in winter, like the pruning would normally be done. But as mentioned earlier in this video, I'm confident to do this summer pruning of these berries because they've been so vigorous in their growth that taking out some of the energy before it returns back to the plant with the leaves dying down in winter and autumn is they're coming off now and going into the mulch or the green waste, and I'll help to control some of the vigorous growth on the plants. So I'm quite confident to do this. You wouldn't necessarily do this with a 1-year-old or with a 2-year-old or 3-year-old plant. These have been here for a good 10 years. What I'm going to do is tip back the ends. So I look for an end. This one's been a bit broken anyway. Where's one that we need to look at? Here's a nice growth here. So this one, by threading through, the thinner ones I've threaded, and I can take it back, take that bit back because it's broken off. What I'm doing is tipping back the ends to encourage less leafy growth to about pencil thickness. That's not quite pencil thickness, but these are not really massive vines. This one I had tipped back a little bit. I'll tip it back a bit further. So I'm cutting back to just in front of a node, as usual, with all pruning. A couple of ratty looking leaves, I'll take those out. Some leaves with insect damage, get rid of those. I'm looking through some of this other growth here. I don't want all that. I can tip that back. So it keeps them a bit tidier and not intrusive in the garden, but it also, here's a nice one here, we'll take this back to where I've tied it. And by tipping back the growth, it encourages more side branching and more berries further down the stalk. So it's not putting its energy into leafy growth, it's trying to encourage more flowers and hopefully more fruit. Okay. Now this is a little sucker of the thornless Loganberry, and I'm going to give this to a friend. So this cane can either be cut back to there or down to ground level. That little bit's a bit ratty, take it off. And these can just be tipped back so that they're a bit less intrusive in the garden, and then they can be dug out as soon as the leaves drop in winter. So there is the finished product of our thornless youngberry, ready for next winter and spring.